Massage, like many jobs, places a certain amount of physical demand on our bodies. So in this video, we're going to look at 7 really simple principles that you can apply that is going to help to minimize the physical demands of doing massage treatments while actually maximizing the effectiveness of your techniques. Be sure to watch the end of the video because we're going to have 3 special tips as we go along that's really going to help you avoid repetitive strain. So let's get started. So our first principle is maintain a neutral spine. Far too often we tend to try to accommodate working around the table or trying to reach a body part on our client by compromising the position of our spine. So typically we'll tend to either rotate, flex, or sometimes translate. We'll do this kind of side shifting motion. Really, we want to try and maintain a neutral spine. So we position ourselves in a way that we're going to try to align ourselves with our client. Think about pointing your sternum towards the area you want to work. Which brings us to our second tip. Where possible, and this isn't going to apply all the time, we're going to look at exceptions, but where possible, you want to try and keep your hands either side of your sternum. So your right hand is just to the right of your sternum, your left hand is to the left, rather than reaching across our body, which again is going to encourage rotation of our spine. So try to align your sternum with your client and the body part that you're working on and keep your hands either side of your sternum. So if I was working on the hamstrings, I would turn so that my sternum is pointed to Alison's hamstrings. Hands are either side of my sternum, and now I can rest in with some body weight and apply my techniques. Whether that's an effleurage, a petrissage, a myofascial technique, whatever it might be, the same principle is going to apply. So we said there are exceptions. Sometimes it's good to vary our posture. While the majority of the time we're going to be in this kind of flexed forward position, to avoid being flexion dominant, we want to try and, where possible, maybe work with one hand. So this might look something like this. I might turn my body this way and lean in. So I'm actually opening up the front of my body, and in effect I'm kind of pushing to the side. I'm still maintaining a neutral spine, and I'm leaning in with some body weight. And this brings me to my fourth point. Typically I'm going to try and have my hips and shoulders pointed in the same direction. So if I'm doing this kind of side lunge, my hips and shoulders are pointed out from the client. In most postures, my hips and shoulders are going to be orientated towards the client. Again, keeping the hips and shoulders pointed in the same direction means I'm not twisting my spine and I'm not developing any kind of repetitive overuse for the muscles in my back or compromising the joints of the spine. Speaking of joints, our next point is going to refer to stacking of joints. So what this means is we want to try and maintain a straight line. And the benefit of this is, as we maintain a straight line through the joints, the bones are aligned, we get what's called axial load, which means the load comes down along the axis or the length of the bone. So say, for example, if I was going to do some work with my thumbs, if I bend my thumbs out, if my thumbs are at a right angle to the rest of my hand, I'm more likely to experience strain or stress on my thumb as the pressure increases. Instead, if I think in terms of pointing, almost pointing at my client, pointing the thumb, and then aligning from the contact surface all the way through to the shoulder, now I can use some body weight. I can lean in without applying any stress. This kind of minimizes the effort we're using, and that's really important because it helps us to maintain our body's resources, that we're not wasting energy or effort. Because all my muscles are doing is they are providing stabilization for the joints. I'm not pushing with small muscles because they'll get tired, fatigued, and possibly even sore. Our next point is bend your knees. And there's a couple of different reasons for this. And this brings us to our first top tip. Using inertia or body weight is our top tip. But point number 6 on our list of 7 is to bend your knees so that you can move with your techniques. This allows body weight to provide the pressure rather than muscular effort. So again, we're conserving energy, but also when we use our body weight, it's consistent. Muscles tend to vary in their output, even when we're trying to push with the same force. And that inconsistency affects how the client is going to respond to the treatment. So if, for example, I'm using a myofascial technique, I'm using maybe the backs of my fingers, when I align my spine, I turn so that my sternum is focused on Alison's hamstrings. My hands are either side of my sternum. I'm going to rest some body weight in by bending my forward leg. Once I sink into depth, we can apply some pressure. For more detailed information on our myofascial technique, check out our myofascial video on YouTube. So as I lean in with body weight is doing the work for me. I've got stacking of joints, straight alignment from my contact surface through to my shoulder. I've got a neutral spine, and as I bend my knees, my body travels forward. Even if I was doing a longer stroke like an effleurage, I want to have one knee bent so that I can transfer my weight from one foot to another. And this brings us to point number 7, our final point. So when we go to do techniques where we're using inertia, we want to make sure that we're placing our feet correctly, because that's really going to have quite an effect. If I plan my way back from my contact surface, like I'm thinking, I want to use the backs of my fingers on Alison's hamstrings. Okay, how do I align my arms to get stacking of joints? How do I develop a neutral spine, pointing my sternum towards the hamstrings, keep my hips and shoulders pointed in the same direction? But if I stand too close, my elbows get driven up around my ears. That is not a good working posture. That is going to cause me overuse and repetitive strain. But if I step back a little bit, my shoulders will drop and now I can lean in with body weight. If I step back too far and I'm trying to do a long stroke, the foot is anchored in place. It prevents me from traveling. So now I have to extend my arms, start flexing my spine and compromising my body mechanics. Another common thing is you'll see people stand at the end of the table and they're leaning over the table. You're not using inertia when you do that. You are bringing your spine into flexion. You are extending the lever, so you're making your shoulders work harder, and it just goes downhill from there. So conserve your energy by planning and seeing, where do I need to place my feet so that I can travel the length of the stroke I need to do? How can I use my body weight and maintain good alignment? This brings us to our top tip number 2. Top tip number 2 is use big muscles instead of small muscles. So this is really going to protect your thumbs in particular. So if I'm doing something like a thumb petrissage or thumb kneading, I'm actually going to move my body weight. So we're back to inertia, our first top tip. If I do that, I'm using the bigger muscles in my legs instead of the small muscles in my thumbs. Because instead, if I circle my thumbs, these muscles are going to get tired. If I keep my thumbs steady and I lean in, let the thumb circle and lean back. It's only small movements, but it means that I'm using those bigger muscles and again, conserving energy, stacking of joints, maintaining good posture, and I don't get tired after a day's therapy. Now for our third tip. Far too often people will stand up and look down at what they're doing, creating an extreme forward head posture, which places a lot of stress at the base of the neck and even down across our shoulders. So here's my top tip. Place your fist between your sternum and your chin. If I want to look down, I can't if I'm standing straight up. So how do I look at what I'm doing? I'm going to adjust my posture, leaning my body forward, still keeping a neutral spine, but now I can look down at what I'm doing without dropping my chin and stressing my neck. So that's going to be a really important thing to remember. If you want to look down, adjust the position of your feet and then align your body so that your head is tilted down without flexing the neck. Now I can easily work without straining my neck. There's more detail on each of the techniques that we've talked about on our YouTube channel. In particular, I'd recommend checking out our video on myofascial technique. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we hope to see you guys again soon.